Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had a battle cat's quirk. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The bell shrieked, a sound of liberation for everyone at Aldera Junior High except for Izuku Midoriya. For him, it was merely the starting pistol for a different kind of race. The one to get his books packed and his body out of the classroom before a certain blonde-haired storm made landfall at his desk. Today, he was too slow. Still scribbling in that creepy notebook, Deku? The voice was a familiar blend of arrogance and gravel, like stones grinding together. Izuku flinched, his hands freezing over his open hero analysis for the future, number 13. On the page was a detailed, if amateur, breakdown of Mount Lady's debut from earlier that morning. He'd added a small, hopeful section in the corner titled Potential Feline Support Strategies, complete with little doodles of blocky, white cats forming a wall to manage crowd control. A hand slammed down on the desk, punctuating the question with a series of miniature explosions. The scent of burnt sugar and nitroglycerin filled the air. Katsuki Bakugo loomed over him, his crimson eyes narrowed into slits of casual contempt. His two cronies flanked him, snickering. "What's it this time?" Bakugo sneered, snatching the notebook before Izuku could react. "Figuring out how your parade of freaks can trip up a villain? Or maybe you'll bore them to death with your mumbling? Keikaken, give it back!" Izuku stammered, reaching for it. His chair scraped against the floor. Bakugo held it just out of reach, flipping through the pages with a disgusted curl of his lip. "Pathetic. You've got all these notes on real heroes with real quirks, and for what? So you can pretend your stupid cat circus is in the same league?" He stopped on a page where Izuku had been practicing drawing his summons. There they were, in all their simplistic glory, the basic cat, a white, kidney bean-shaped creature with two simple dots for eyes and an unnervingly wide smile, and the tank cat, an almost perfect rectangle with the same face, just squashed and wider. "Look at this," one of Bakugo's cronies wheezed, pointing. "He really thinks he can be a hero with these things. What do they even do? Shed on the enemy?" Izuku's quirk, battle cats, had manifested when he was 4, just like everyone else, but where Bakugo produced awe-inspiring explosions and others could stretch their limbs or create objects, Izuku had produced a cat, a single, two-dimensional, solid light construct that had waddled forward 5 feet, bumped into his mother's leg with a soft thump, and then dissolved into motes of light. The doctor had called it a minor summoning quirk. Bakugo had called it lame. The name had stuck. His quirk was a part of him, an energy source he could feel humming just beneath his skin, a well of power he mentally referred to as cat food. Summoning drew from that well, and it was a shallow one. A handful of basic cats, maybe 4 or 5, and he'd feel a deep, bone-weary fatigue set in. 2 tank cats, which were denser and more resilient, would leave him feeling dizzy and winded, as if he'd just run a 100-meter dash. Each summon had a cooldown, a phantom timer in his mind that prevented him from spamming them. He was a general with a tiny, exhausted army. "You know, they put a new rule in place this year," Bakugo said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You're not allowed to use quirks in the entrance exams for the top schools unless you have a license. But someone like you, with a quirk that couldn't even pop a balloon? They'd probably make an exception out of pity." He smiled, a predator's grin. "Don't even think about applying to you, Deku." With a sudden, violent motion, Bakugo slammed the notebook between his palms, a powerful explosion erupting from the point of impact. Boom! The force sent a shockwave through the air. Izuku cried out as his charred, smoking notebook was tossed carelessly out the open window. "If you want to be a hero so bad," Bakugo said, smoke wafting from his palms as he turned to leave, "I've got a time-saving idea for you. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building and pray you'll be born with a useful quirk in your next life." The words hit Izuku like a physical blow. The air rushed out of his lungs. He stood there, trembling, as Bakugo and his lackeys sauntered out of the classroom, their laughter echoing down the empty hall. For a long moment, Izuku was frozen, a cold, dark fury mixing with the usual cocktail of fear and despair. He wanted to scream, to summon a tank cat and throw it at Bakugo's back, but he knew what would happen. The cat would materialize with a faint pop thwomp, waddle forward, and Bakugo would blast it to glittering dust without even turning around. Then he'd turn around. Izuku swallowed the rage. It tasted like ash. He trudged outside and found his notebook in the koi pond, the fish nibbling at the burnt, waterlogged pages. He clutched it to his chest, the dampness seeping into his uniform. It wasn't just paper and ink. It was his dream, his analysis, his hope. And Bakugo had tried to destroy it as easily as he destroyed one of his cats. Pray you'll be born with a useful quirk, the thought followed him as he walked home, a venomous whisper in his ear. Maybe Bakugo was right. What could he actually do? His basic cats were weak, more of a tripping hazard than a threat. His tank cats could take a hit, sure, but a single decent blow from a strength enhancement quirk would shatter them. His power was an inconvenience at best, a joke at worst. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't notice the change in atmosphere in the underpass until it was too late. The air grew thick and heavy, and a rancid smell, like an open sewer, filled his nostrils. A voice gurgled from behind him. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, you'll do. Izuku spun around, and his heart seized in his chest. A hulking, monstrous creature made of green, viscous sludge was pouring out of a manhole cover. It had two bulging, manic eyes and a grotesque, stretched-out mouth. A villain. Here. Before Izuku could even think to scream, the sludge monster lunged. It was like being hit by a tidal wave of filth. The liquid mass enveloped him, forcing its way into his mouth and nose. It was suffocating, a horrifying pressure crushing him from all sides. He clawed at the sludge, but his fingers just sank into the goop. His lungs burned. Panic, cold and absolute, washed over him. I'm dying. I'm going to die. He tried to activate his quirk, to summon a tank cat inside the villain's body to create space, but he couldn't focus. The drain on his energy was already immense from the struggle for air. His vision started to black out at the edges. Then, a voice boomed like thunder. Have no fear, for I am here. The manhole cover shot into the air like a cannonball. A massive figure stood silhouetted against the light. The mountain of muscle, the twin tufts of golden hair, the indomitable smile. It was All Might, Texas. Smash! A gale-force wind ripped through the underpass. The air pressure changed so violently that the sludge villain was torn apart, blasted off Izuku's body in 1,000 slimy droplets. Izuku collapsed to the ground, gasping, coughing up sludge and desperately sucking in the clean, fresh air. He looked up just in time to see All Might trapping the villain's remains in a pair of empty soda bottles. It was a blur after that. All Might's booming laughter, his concern, the autograph he signed in Izuku's now sludge-covered notebook. Izuku's mind was reeling, 1,000 questions swirling within him. He had to know. He couldn't let this chance slip away. As All Might prepared to leap away, Izuku did something incredibly stupid. He latched onto his leg. The flight through the air was terrifying, his grip a desperate, white-knuckled thing. They landed hard on a rooftop, and the reality of the situation came crashing down. And then, the second shock of the day, the steam, the shriveling form, the reveal of a skeletal, wounded man where the symbol of peace had stood moments before. All Might, the number one hero, was broken. Izuku listened, horrified and fascinated, as the hero explained his injury, the time limit on his power. It was a secret that could shatter society. It was a burden that this man carried every single day, and in the face of that monumental struggle, Izuku's own problems felt so small, so insignificant. But still, he had to ask. He had to hear it from him. Even if I don't have a powerful quirk, Izuku began, his voice trembling, his hands clenched at his sides. Even if my quirk is weak and kind of a joke, can I still be a hero? All Might was silent for a long moment, his hollow eyes gazing out at the city below. He looked tired, a profound weariness etched into his features. Pro-heroes are always laying their lives on the line, he said, his voice soft but firm. Some villains can't be beaten without overwhelming power. Without that, you'd just be a liability in a fight. You'd be putting not only your own life at risk, but the lives of others. He turned to look at Izuku, his expression grim but not unkind. So no. I honestly don't think you can be a hero without a powerful quirk. It's good to have dreams, young man. But you need to make sure they're realistic. Each word was a nail hammered into Izuku's heart. He'd expected it. He'd heard it a million times from Kaken, from his classmates, from the doubt in his own mind. But hearing it from his idol, from the one person he believed could make anything possible, was different. It was final. The dream was dead. All Might left him there on the roof, the door to the stairwell clanging shut behind him. Izuku stood motionless, the wind whipping his hair, his gaze empty. He couldn't even bring himself to cry. There was just a vast, hollow numbness where his hope used to be. He was still standing there minutes later when an explosion rocked the city streets below. A plume of black smoke billowed into the air from a nearby shopping district. Another villain attack. Izuku barely registered it. What was the point? It was a world he could never be a part of. He listlessly made his way to the stairwell, his feet dragging like lead weights. When he reached the street, a crowd had gathered. He pushed his way to the front, his gaze drawn to the chaos. Fire, destruction, and in the center of it all, the Sludge villain. It had escaped. The bottles must have fallen from All Might's pocket during their impromptu flight. And it had a hostage, a young boy with spiky blonde hair, thrashing and setting off explosions that were only making the situation worse. It was Bakugo. Izuku's blood ran cold. The pro-heroes were there, Death Arms, Backdraft, Kamui Woods, but they were helpless. Death Arms couldn't get a grip on the liquid body. Backdraft was busy containing the fires Bakugo's explosions were causing. Kamui Woods was made of wood. The fire made it impossible for him to get close. They were all waiting for someone with the right quirk to show up. No one was helping him. Bakugo's eyes, usually so full of rage and confidence, were wide with terror. For a split second, his terrified gaze met Izuku's. It was a look of desperation, of a boy drowning and seeing a single, unreachable hand on the shore. And in that moment, something inside Izuku broke. His legs moved before his brain could catch up. He was running, scrambling under the police tape, sprinting towards the inferno. The heroes shouted at him, telling him to stop, that it was suicide. He didn't hear them. All he could hear was the blood pounding in his ears and All Might's words echoing in his mind. I don't think you can be a hero. Maybe he was right. He didn't have a powerful quirk. He couldn't punch the villain into oblivion. He couldn't freeze it or burn it away. His cats were flimsy, weak constructs of light. What could he possibly do? His mind, a finely honed machine of analysis that had been dormant with despair, suddenly roared to life. Villain composition, liquid, amorphous. Physical attacks are ineffective because they lack a solid point of impact. Hostage is volatile, creating more damage. Pro-heroes' quirks are poorly matched for the situation. Goal is not to defeat the villain. Goal is to save the hostage. My quirk, Battle Cats. Summon type. Units, Basic Cat, Low Cost, Low Health, Fodder, Tank Cat, Medium Cost, High Health, Defensive. Cannot inflict significant damage. But, an idea sparked, wild and insane, disruption. Not destruction. Clog the system. He didn't have power, but he had numbers. He had bodies. And the villain was made of liquid. Get back here, you idiot! Death Arms yelled. Izuku ignored him. He was 10 feet away from the swirling vortex of sludge and explosions. He planted his feet, took a deep breath, and shoved his hands forward as if pushing against a solid wall. He focused on the well of energy inside him, his cat food, and opened the floodgates. Hurrah! The first one materialized in front of him with a soft pop thwomp. A tank cat. It was a 2-foot-tall, solid white rectangle of light, its simple eyes and wide smile a bizarre contrast to the terrifying scene. It waddled forward on its 2 stubby legs. Not enough. Izuku poured more energy out. The drain was immediate and intense, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Another tank cat popped into existence. And another. And another. A conveyor belt of cartoonish, blocky cats, appearing one after the other, their creation draining the color from Izuku's face. What is he doing? Someone in the crowd yelled. Is that his quirk? Another asked, bewildered. He's making cats? The first tank cat reached the villain. It didn't attack. It just walked straight into the sludge. The liquid form sputtered and bulged as the solid light construct pushed its way inside. The second followed, then the third. The sludge villain roared in annoyance, not pain. What is this pest doing? Izuku kept going, pushing past his limits. His head was pounding. His vision swam. He could feel his energy reserves plummeting. But he saw it working. The villain's body was a container with a finite volume. He couldn't hurt it, but he could fill it up. He summoned a continuous, desperate stream of tank cats. They marched forward, an endless, silent army of absurdity, and plunged into the villain's form. The sludge began to stretch and strain. The more cats Izuku forced inside, the more solid and less fluid the villain became. It was like pouring sand into a bucket of water. Bakugo, who had been completely submerged, suddenly found a pocket of space as a tank cat forced a section of the villain's body away from his face. He took a desperate, ragged gasp of air. "Keep it up, kid!" Death Arm shouted, his shock replaced by a flicker of hope. Izuku gritted his teeth, sweat and tears streaming down his face. He felt like he was going to pass out. He could feel the bottom of his energy well. Just a little more. He focused every last ounce of his will into a final, massive push. 10 more tank cats materialized in a rapid-fire sequence. A wall of white that surged forward and crashed into the villain. The sludge monster gurgled, its form now lumpy and distorted, clogged with the unyielding shapes of the cartoon cats. Its grip on Bakugo loosened for a critical second. That was all the opening All Might needed. Appearing as if from nowhere, his muscular form restored, he grabbed Bakugo's arm and pulled. "I really am pathetic," he admonished himself, his smile back in place. With the villain's body destabilized by Izuku's cat-clogging strategy, All Might's punch found purchase. Detroit. Smash! The punch was a cataclysm. The shockwave it generated was so powerful that it changed the weather, causing rain to fall from a clear sky. The sludge villain was obliterated, splattered into harmless puddles across the street. The crowd erupted in cheers. The crisis was over. Izuku's legs finally gave out. He collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. The world was a blurry, spinning mess. The last of his summoned cats flickered and dissolved into light. He had done it. He had actually done something. The aftermath was a whirlwind. He was checked over by paramedics, who declared him fine, just suffering from severe quirk exhaustion. Then came the scolding. Death Arms and the other pros lectured him on his recklessness, his foolishness, how he could have gotten himself killed. He just stared at the pavement, numbly accepting their words. Then Bakugo stormed over to him, his face a mask of incandescent rage. "I didn't need your help," he screamed, his voice raw. "I had it handled. Don't you ever look down on me like that again, you useless, quirkless wannabe. You and your stupid cat army didn't do anything." He turned and stalked away without another word. Izuku watched him go. He hadn't been looking down on him. He had been looking up, like always. Dejected, Izuku began the walk home, the praise for All Might and the criticism for his own actions ringing in his ears. Bakugo was right. He hadn't done anything, not really. All Might was the one who had saved the day. Izuku had just performed a ridiculous, desperate stunt that happened to work. It wasn't heroic. It was just lucky. "I am here." The voice made Izuku jump out of his skin. All Might, in his muscle form, zipped around the corner, coming to a dramatic stop in front of him. "Young man! I have been looking for you," he boomed. Then, just as suddenly, he deflated, steam hissing from his body as he reverted to his skeletal form. He coughed, a trickle of blood dribbling from his mouth. "Kid," he began, his voice serious. "I came to thank you. And to apologize. And to correct what I said earlier." Izuku stared, dumbfounded. "Huh! What you did back there, it was incredible," All Might said, his hollow eyes burning with a new intensity. "All the heroes, myself included, were standing around, waiting for someone else to act. But you, a young man who I had just told had no potential, you were the only one who moved. You ran into danger, not because you had a quirk that could win, but because you saw someone in trouble." He took a step closer, leaning in. "And your quirk. That was the most creative, and frankly bizarre, use of a quirk I've seen in years. You assessed the enemy, analyzed your own abilities, and devised a strategy that no one else would have ever conceived. You didn't have a single ounce of offensive power, yet you saved that boy's life with strategy and guts. He stood up straight, a faint glimmer of his heroic smile returning to his face. That is the heart of a hero. Young man, I was wrong. Your quirk isn't weak. It's unconventional. It requires a different kind of strength. Not just physical, but mental. And you have that in spades. Tears began to well up in Izuku's eyes, hot and unstoppable. The stories of the greatest heroes all have one thing in common, All Might continued, his voice resonating with conviction. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. And today, that was you. Izuku sobbed, the culmination of a lifetime of pain, doubt, and desperation finally breaking free. He fell to his knees overwhelmed. Therefore, All Might declared, pointing a long, bony finger at the weeping boy. You can become a hero. Those were the words Izuku had longed to hear his entire life. They were a balm on a wound that had festered for a decade. They were the key that unlocked the future. When his sobs finally subsided, Izuku looked up, his eyes red but shining with a light that had been absent for years. But how? The UA entrance exam. It's all about combat. How can I pass with a quirk like mine? All Might's grin widened. That's the other reason I'm here. I told you that you needed a different kind of strength. And I'm going to help you build it. Your quirk is fueled by your own energy, correct? Your stamina? Izuku nodded, wiping his eyes on his sleeve. Why yes. I call it cat food. The more I summon, the more tired I get. Exactly. All Might exclaimed. So the solution is simple. We need to turn your body into a deep, overflowing well of that cat food energy. We will train your physical body to its absolute peak. More muscle, more endurance, a stronger constitution. It will all translate into a larger energy pool and a faster recharge rate for your quirk. You won't just summon a handful of cats. You will summon a legion. You are not a frontline brawler, young man. You are a general, a tactician, a one-man army's command center. And I will help you train to become the best damn general UA has ever seen. He handed Izuku a piece of paper. This is my contact information. The training will be hell. It will push you further than you ever thought you could go. But if you are serious about this, if you truly want to be a hero with your own unique power, then meet me at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park tomorrow at dawn. Izuku took the paper, his hand shaking. He looked from the number to the hero standing before him, the symbol of peace, who was offering not a handout, not a shortcut, but a chance to work, to struggle, to bleed and sweat and earn his dream on his own terms, with his own power. It was more than he could have ever hoped for. I'll be there, Izuku said, his voice no longer a timid stutter, but a quiet, firm promise. As All Might gave him a final thumbs up and departed, Izuku stood alone on the quiet street, clutching the piece of paper in one hand and his soggy, ruined notebook in the other. The sun was setting, casting long shadows, but for the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya wasn't afraid of the dark. He had a long, hard road ahead of him, a 10-month journey to forge his body into a vessel worthy of his dream. It would be a path paved with exhaustion and hardship, but it would be his. His and his alone, and at the end of it, his army of cats would be waiting. The sun had not yet begun its ascent, and the world was painted in hues of deep indigo and gray. The only light came from the distant, sleepless glow of the city, and the pale sliver of a waning moon. The air at Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was thick and still, carrying a scent that was a nauseating cocktail of salt, decay, and years of accumulated neglect. Before Izuku Midoriya stood not a park, but a monument to apathy. Mountains of rusted appliances, tangled fishing nets, broken furniture, and generations of forgotten refuse choked the coastline, stretching from the seawall to the water's edge. It was an impossible task. A landfill that had swallowed a beach whole. So, a familiar, reedy voice said from beside him. What do you think? Izuku turned to see the skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi, leaning against a rusted-out pickup truck. He was wearing a simple tracksuit and looked less like the symbol of peace and more like a man who had gotten horribly lost on his way to a doctor's appointment. It's a lot bigger up close, Izuku managed, his voice barely a whisper. The sheer scale of the challenge was crushing. His dream of becoming a hero suddenly felt very far away, buried somewhere under a mountain of discarded tires. Toshinori let out a dry chuckle. That it is, my boy. That it is. He walked over to a hulking, moss-covered refrigerator and patted its side. For the next 10 months, this is your gym. This is your opponent, and this is your path to UA. He handed Izuku a meticulously planned schedule, laminated and printed in bright, heroic colors. At the top, in bold letters, it read, The American Dream Plan, Feline Fortitude Edition. It was a dizzying grid of sleep schedules, dietary plans, heavy on protein, Izuku noted schoolwork slots, and a grueling physical regimen that involved hauling specific types of trash across the beach for hours on end. The plan is simple, young Midoriya, Toshinori explained, his tone shifting from casual to that of a seasoned coach. Your quirk, Battle Cats, is directly tied to your physical stamina. Think of your body as a battery. Right now you're a cheap, off-brand AA. You run out of juice after a few minutes of use. We are going to rebuild you, from the ground up, into a high-capacity, industrial-grade power station. He pointed a long, bony finger at the endless sea of garbage. Every piece of junk you move, every muscle you strain, every drop of sweat you pour onto this sand will be another drop of fuel in your tank. More stamina means a bigger pool of cat food energy. A stronger body means a faster recharge rate. By the time the UA exam rolls around, you won't be summoning a handful of cats. You'll be capable of fielding a proper army. Izuku stared at the plan, then at the garbage. His hands, soft and accustomed to holding nothing heavier than a pencil, felt woefully inadequate. I can't even move that refrigerator, he said, his voice laced with doubt. Not yet, Toshinori corrected, his eyes glinting. But you will. He cracked his knuckles. Now enough talk. Your first task is to drag that washing machine, he pointed to a slightly smaller but still intimidating metal box, to that dumpster over there. The dumpster was a good 50 meters away. Let's see your starting line. Izuku took a deep breath, the foul air filling his lungs. This was it. The first step. He gripped the edge of the washing machine. The metal was cold and slick with morning dew. He planted his feet, bent his knees like he'd seen heroes do on TV, and pulled. Nothing happened. The machine didn't budge. It was as if it were bolted to the very core of the earth. He pulled again, his arms shaking, a pathetic grunt escaping his lips. Still nothing. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pricked at his eyes. He couldn't even move the first piece of trash. This is your baseline, Toshinori said, his voice betraying no judgment. This is day 1. 10 months from now, you'll be throwing these things around. Now try again, and this time, try summoning a cat to help. Izuku, grateful for the suggestion, focused inward. He felt the familiar, shallow well of his energy. He drew on it, and with a soft pop thwomp, a single basic cat materialized beside him. Its simple, smiling face was an odd comfort in the grim landscape. Okay, Izuku mumbled, more to himself than to the cat. Push with me. He gripped the machine again, and the small, two-dimensional creature waddled up and began headbutting the rusted metal with a series of dull, hollow thumps. Together, they pulled and pushed. The washing machine groaned, scraped against the sand, and moved. A single, glorious inch. Izuku felt a tiny spark of triumph, immediately extinguished by a wave of exhaustion. That one small summon, combined with the physical effort, had already taken a noticeable toll. He looked at the 50 meters to the dumpster, and felt a fresh wave of despair. This was going to be hell. The first 3 months were, in a word, agony. Every morning began before dawn, with Toshinori's relentlessly cheerful "I am here to supervise your training." Izuku's life became a cycle of pain and perseverance. He'd haul garbage until his arms felt like they would fall off, attend school in a haze of exhaustion, study until his eyes burned, and collapse into bed, only to wake up aching in places he didn't know he had muscles. His hands, once smooth, were now a geography of calluses, blisters, and small cuts. He learned the unique weight and balance of a car axle versus a waterlogged sofa. He discovered that tires were deceptively difficult to move, and that tangled masses of fishing nets were the absolute worst, a Sisyphean task of untangling and dragging. Toshinori was an unrelenting taskmaster. He pushed Izuku to his physical limit and then, when Izuku was on the verge of collapse, he'd make him train his quirk. Your body is screaming for a break, young Midoriya. He'd shout from atop a pile of scrap metal, a stopwatch in hand. This is when a real hero has to push through. A villain won't wait for you to catch your breath. Summon a wall. Hold it for 30 seconds. Izuku, gasping for air, would slam his hands on the sand and pour out what little energy he had left. 4, maybe 5, tank cats would materialize, forming a short, wobbly wall of white light. He'd focus on holding them, his entire body trembling with the strain. At first, he could only maintain them for 10 seconds before they flickered and died, leaving him dizzy and seeing stars. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, things began to change. Around the 6-week mark, he successfully dragged the washing machine from the start of his training all the way to the dumpster without a break. He collapsed afterward, but he had done it. A month later, he found he could summon 6 tank cats and hold them for the full 30 seconds, and still have enough energy to walk home without his legs threatening to buckle. His body was adapting. The scrawny, soft boy was being stripped away, replaced by someone leaner, harder. He could see the faint outline of muscles in his arms and legs. His cat food energy, once a shallow puddle, was deepening. He could feel it, a denser, more potent core of power within him. He started experimenting, pushing the boundaries. He could now summon a dozen basic cats at once, a small, waddling horde that he would use to help push larger objects, their combined, albeit weak, force making a tangible difference. His mother, Inko, had noticed the changes immediately. At first, it was the sheer volume of food he was consuming. Then, it was the way his school uniform, once a bit baggy, was now starting to fit him snugly around the shoulders and chest. One evening, she found him in his room, not hunched over his hero analysis notebooks, but doing push-ups on the floor, sweat dripping from his brow. "Izuku?" she asked, her voice soft with a mixture of concern and surprise. "Is everything all right? You've been so driven lately." He paused, mid-push-up, and gave her a tired but genuine smile. "I'm great, Mom. I've just decided I'm not going to let anyone tell me what I can or can't do anymore. I'm going to get into UA." There was a new steel in his voice, a quiet confidence she hadn't heard since he was a small boy, before the world had told him his quirk wasn't good enough. She didn't know the full story, didn't know about All Might or the secret training, but she saw the fire in her son's eyes had been reignited. Her own eyes welled with tears of pride. "Okay, honey," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just make sure you're getting enough to eat." The 7th month was a turning point. A large section of the beach was now clear, a testament to Izuku's relentless labor. The pristine stretch of sand looked alien next to the remaining heaps of garbage. Izuku's physique had undergone a remarkable transformation. He was still lean, but now he was corded with hard-earned muscle. He could now haul things that had once been immovable. Today's challenge was an old, rust-eaten refrigerator, the same one Toshinori had patted on that first day. It was wedged deep in the sand, half buried and stubborn. It had become a sort of personal nemesis for Izuku. "This is the last major obstacle on this side of the beach," Toshinori said, observing from a safe distance. "Clear this, and we move to the central mound. Show me what 7 months of work looks like." Izuku nodded, his expression serious. He took his stance. He summoned 10 tank cats, positioning them behind the fridge to act as a solid wall for him to push against, preventing him from slipping in the sand. Then he summoned 20 basic cats to push alongside him. It was a significant drain on his energy, but it was manageable now. A few months ago, a summon of this size would have been his absolute limit. "Okay, everyone," he said to his silent, smiling army. "On 3. 1, 2, 3, he roared, putting his entire body into the effort. His muscles screamed in protest. The cats pushed, their combined force a steady, unified pressure. The sand groaned. The refrigerator shifted, its rusted legs scraping free with a horrible shriek of metal. It was moving, but it wasn't enough. It moved a few feet and then settled, its weight sinking it back into the soft sand. "Damn it," Izuku gasped, his energy wavering. A few of the basic cats flickered and vanished. Don't give up, young Midoriya. Tashinori's voice boomed. The moment you think you've hit your limit is the exact moment you need to push harder. Go beyond. Plus Ultra, the hero's famous motto, yelled with such fervor, struck a chord deep within Izuku. His limit. He was always so afraid of his limit, so used to being defined by it. The fatigue, the dizziness, the collapse. But what if there was something on the other side? He closed his eyes, ignoring the burning in his lungs and the screaming of his muscles. He reached deeper into his well of power, past the point of comfort, past the point of exhaustion. He searched for a reserve he didn't even know he had, a final, desperate drop of fuel. He felt a searing pain behind his eyes, a feeling like his very soul was being stretched thin. With a final, guttural scream that tore from his throat, he gave one last, monumental shove. The world seemed to go white with the effort. Scrape! The refrigerator shot forward, sliding a full 10 feet before toppling onto its side with a heavy thud. Izuku collapsed. He didn't just fall. It felt like the strings holding him up had been simultaneously cut. His vision went black, and he hit the sand, his consciousness dissolving into a silent, empty void. He was floating in a space that was not a space. It was warm and quiet. In the distance, he saw a light, not bright or blinding, but gentle and colorful, like a rainbow-hued nebula. It pulsed with a soft, chiming sound, a clear, musical note that resonated within his very being. As the light washed over him, he felt something click into place inside his quirk. A new gear engaging in a familiar machine. A new file being downloaded. A simple, game-like window flickered into existence in his mind's eye. It was the same interface he saw when he chose which cat to summon, but now there was something new. A notification. Rare cat capsule unlocked. Open? He didn't have to think. The answer was a primal, instinctual yes. The capsule in his mind spun, glowed, and cracked open. A new figure appeared, its silhouette unfamiliar. New unit acquired Axe Cat. Attributes, high attack power. Effective against red enemies. The vision faded. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He was lying on the sand, the salty air filling his lungs. Tashinori was kneeling over him, a look of profound concern on his gaunt face. Young Midoriya. Are you alright? You were out for a full minute. I think so, Izuku mumbled, sitting up. His head was pounding, and his body felt completely hollowed out, but there was something else. A new sensation. He could feel it in his quirk, a new button in his mental arsenal, a new presence waiting to be called. Something happened, Izuku said, his eyes wide with discovery. My quirk, it changed. I think I have a new cat. Tashinori's eyebrows shot up. A new one? Your quirk can evolve? I don't know if it's evolution or an unlock, Izuku said, trying to find the words. It felt like a reward. For pushing past my limit. He staggered to his feet, his legs still shaky. He had to see it. He had to know it was real. He focused on the new presence, feeling its unique energy signature. It felt sharper, more aggressive than his other cats. It also had a higher energy cost than a basic cat, but less than a tank cat. He channeled the small bit of energy he had recovered and pushed it out. A new shape materialized with the familiar pop thwomp. It was the same height as a basic cat, with the same kidney bean body and simple face. But this one was different. It wore a tiny, crude helmet, and in its right hand, it brandished a disproportionately large, solid light axe. The Axe Cat. It had a slightly angrier look in its dot eyes, a determined set to its wide smile. Incredible, Tashinori breathed, studying the new summon. It seems your quirk is tied not just to your physical stamina, but to your growth as well. It rewards you for overcoming great challenges. The Axe Cat waddled forward and, seemingly of its own volition, swung its axe at a nearby piece of scrap metal. Clang! The sound was sharp, and a noticeable dent appeared on the metal's surface. A basic cat's head but would have done nothing. This one had actual offensive power. But what did it mean, effective against red enemies? Izuku's analytical mind immediately kicked into overdrive. It was a specific, game-like attribute. He needed to test it. His eyes scanned the beach, looking for something, anything, red. His gaze fell upon a half-buried, rusted fire hydrant, its paint chipped and faded, but still undeniably crimson. "Over there," Izuku said, pointing. He commanded the axe cat, a simple, nonverbal instruction that was second nature to him. The little creature waddled over to the fire hydrant. It swung its axe. Crunch! The sound was completely different. The solid light axe bit deep into the metal of the hydrant, sending a shower of rust-colored sparks into the air. A large gash appeared in its side. The axe cat swung again. Crunch! And again. Crunch! With each swing against the red object, the axe seemed to hit with exponentially greater force, as if the color itself were a vulnerability. Izuku and Toshinori stared, mouths agape. "That's..." Izuku started, his mind racing, connecting dots, forming theories. "That's my first real weapon." He had an infantry unit in the basic cat. He had a defensive unit in the tank cat. And now, he had an anti-armor unit. A specialist. It was a paradigm shift. His quirk wasn't just about swarms and walls anymore. Now, it had a cutting edge. That night, Izuku didn't sleep. He was hunched over a brand new notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 14. The old one was a cherished memory, but this one was the future. He filled page after page with frantic energy. He drew the axe cat from every angle. He formulated new strategies, new combinations. Tank cat front line to absorb initial impact. Basic cats to swarm and distract. Axe cats held in reserve, deployed as a shock troop to target specific weaknesses. What counts as red? Does it have to be a specific shade? Is it the concept of red? What about villains with red costumes or features? His world had just expanded tenfold. He felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years. It was the joy of discovery, of potential, of a puzzle box that was finally revealing its hidden compartments. The final 3 months passed in a blur of focused, intensified training. Izuku's regimen now had a new component: tactical drills. Toshinori would set up scenarios for him among the remaining piles of garbage. "A villain is holding hostages behind that pile of tires," he'd yell. "Their quirk creates a red energy shield. What do you do, General Midoriya?" Izuku, breathing hard, would direct his feline troops. "Tank cats, advance. Form a protective line. Basic cats, flanking maneuver, draw their fire. Axe cats, on my mark, charge the shield." He would practice summoning them in sequence, managing their cooldowns, conserving his now vast energy pool. He learned to be a battlefield commander, using the terrain of the beach to his advantage, positioning his simple-looking troops with the precision of a chess grandmaster. His body and quirk grew in perfect sync. He was stronger, faster, and more resilient than he had ever imagined possible. Summoning 30 cats at once barely winded him. His control was finer, his summons faster. He was a well-oiled machine, ready for his first real test. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, Izuku stood with Toshinori on the beach. It was unrecognizable. The 10 months of hell had transformed it. The sand was pristine, golden, and completely clean, stretching out to meet the crystal-clear water. The rising sun glinted off the waves, a breathtakingly beautiful sight. They hadn't just cleaned a beach, they had reclaimed a piece of the world. Izuku stood tall, his new, well-muscled frame filling out his school uniform. He looked at his hands, no longer soft, but strong and capable. He looked at the clean beach, a symbol of his impossible achievement. "You did it, my boy," Toshinori said, placing a proud, heavy hand on his shoulder. He looked healthier, the hope Izuku had given him seeming to fill out his skeletal frame. "You took an impossible task and you conquered it. You didn't just train your body, you performed a great act of public service. You were a hero long before you ever set foot in UA." Izuku felt a lump in his throat. He looked at the man who had believed in him when no one else would, who had given him this chance. "Thank you, All Might," he said, his voice thick with gratitude. "For everything." Toshinori, the hero, corrected with a small smile. "Now go. Your real journey is just beginning. Go and show them what a boy with an army of cats can do." Izuku nodded, a fierce determination in his eyes. He took a deep breath of the clean, salty air. He reached into his quirk, the deep, humming well of power he had built from scratch, and summoned a small honor guard. A stalwart tank cat stood to his left. A feisty axe cat, axe at the ready, stood to his right, and in front of him, a single, smiling basic cat, the first unit he had ever summoned, the one that had started it all. They were a strange, cartoonish trio. To anyone else, they would look ridiculous. But to Izuku, they were a reflection of his journey. Defense. Offense. And the simple, unwavering courage to take the first step. Together, they turned away from the rising sun and the reclaimed beach, and began the walk towards UA High School. The exam was waiting. The first part of the UA High entrance exam was not a battle of quirks, but a battle of wits, and for Izuku Midoriya, it was like coming home. The grand auditorium where the written test was held was silent save for the rustle of paper and the scratching of pencils. While many of his fellow hopefuls sweated over complex equations or obscure historical facts, Izuku felt a profound sense of calm. This was his arena. For years, his notebooks had been filled not just with quirk analysis, but with the peripheral knowledge required to understand them. Physics to comprehend force multiplication quirks, chemistry for material creation types, history to study the evolution of hero law, and ethics to understand the very philosophy of heroism. The questions on the exam paper felt less like a test and more like a conversation with an old friend. He moved through the sections with a quiet, focused efficiency, his mind a well-oiled machine of analysis and recall. He finished with nearly half the allotted time remaining, a small, confident smile gracing his lips for the first time that day. For a boy who had spent a decade feeling physically inadequate, proving his mental prowess was a victory in itself. The practical exam briefing, however, was a completely different story. The examinees were herded into a massive, state-of-the-art auditorium with a screen the size of a building. The lights dimmed, and a figure exploded onto the stage, clad in leather, sunglasses, and a ridiculously tall blonde pompadour. "What's up, UA candidates? Welcome to the main event." The pro-hero present Mike screamed into a microphone, his voice so loud it physically rattled Izuku's teeth. "Are you ready to feel the noise?" A dead, nervous silence answered him. Izuku, despite the ringing in his ears, felt a thrill shoot through him. This was real. He was sitting in the same room where countless legendary heroes had once sat. He clutched his worn backpack straps, his knuckles white. Present Mike, undeterred by the lack of response, launched into a high-speed explanation of the practical exam. They would be sent into massive, fully realized urban replicas. The objective was to score points by disabling villain bots, which came in 3 varieties, each worth a corresponding number of points, 1, 2, or 3. Think of it like a video game, listeners. You've got 10 minutes to rack up a heroic high score. Izuku's brain immediately kicked into high gear. His mumbling started before he could stop it, a low, rapid-fire stream of analysis. Okay, so it's a combat-focused test, just as I predicted. Points are awarded for disabling, not necessarily total destruction. That's an important distinction. Efficiency is key. Using overwhelming power on a one-pointer would be a waste of energy and time. The different point values must correspond to difficulty and durability. The 2-pointers might be faster or have better armor. The 3-pointers could have long-range capabilities. The test area is huge, so mobility will be a factor. But my quirk isn't built for speed, unless... Maybe I could. And you, with the messy green hair. The voice was loud, sharp, and cut through Izuku's muttering like a knife. A spotlight swiveled and landed directly on him, making him yelp and shrink in his seat. A tall, well-built young man with glasses and dark blue hair stood a few rows down, his arm chopped down in a rigid, pointing gesture. He was the picture of stern formality. "You have been muttering for this entire presentation," he declared, his voice ringing with indignation. "It is distracting and disrespectful to the other examinees who are trying to concentrate. If you believe this to be some sort of game, then I suggest you leave immediately." Izuku's face burned a shade of crimson usually reserved for fire hydrants. Sorry," he squeaked, covering his mouth with both hands. Laughter rippled through the auditorium. He wanted the floor to swallow him whole. From several rows ahead, he heard a familiar, contemptuous snort. Bakugo. Of course, the formal boy wasn't finished. He turned his attention back to President Mike. Furthermore, on the pamphlet provided, it lists 4 types of villains. Yet you have only mentioned 3. If this is a misprint on UA's official materials, it is a great shame for Japan's most prestigious hero academy. And if it is intentional, then more clarity is required. Alright, examinee 7111, thanks for the enthusiastic call-in. President Mike responded, a wide grin on his face. The 4th villain type is the zero-pointer. Think of it as a stage gimmick, a massive obstacle to be avoided. It's worth 0 points and is tough as nails. Your best bet is to just run away. The formal boy gave a crisp bow. Thank you for the clarification. My apologies for the interruption. He sat down as rigidly as he had stood up. Izuku, meanwhile, was processing the new information. A 0-point obstacle. An intentional distraction designed to showcase and test situational awareness. Avoid it, his brain logged. Wasting energy on it would be the ultimate mistake. He risked a glance around. Everyone looked so confident, so powerful. He saw a girl cracking her knuckles, which seemed to be made of solid rock. A boy was nonchalantly sparking with electricity. And then there was Kaken, leaning back in his seat, radiating an aura of absolute, terrifying confidence. Izuku felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in his stomach. His 10 months of training felt like a tiny flickering candle in a hurricane of incredible quirks. They were bused to their assigned battle centers. Izuku found himself standing before Battle Center B, a sprawling cityscape of towering skyscrapers and winding streets, all sealed off by a gigantic concrete wall with a single, massive gate. The sheer scale was breathtaking. He was surrounded by other examinees, all stretching and preparing for the coming trial. He was so busy trying to quell his racing heart that he didn't notice his own feet. He stumbled forward, his shoe catching on a crack in the pavement. He flailed, his backpack overbalancing him, sending him careening towards the ground in what was sure to be a painful, embarrassing faceplant. Suddenly, the feeling of falling stopped. He was floating, suspended an inch from the concrete. Whoa there! Are you okay? A cheerful, friendly voice asked. He looked up to see a girl with a round face, rosy cheeks, and warm brown eyes. Her hand was outstretched, her pinky finger raised. She gently tapped him on the back. Release, she said, and gravity reasserted itself. He landed softly on his feet. It's my quirk, she explained with a smile. Sorry for using it on you without asking, but it'd be bad luck to fall right before the exam, right? Thank you. Izuku stammered, his face flushing again. That's an amazing quirk. It must be great for rescue and mobility, and the way you control it seems so precise, it implies a deep understanding of mass and… He cut himself off before his mumbling could take over again. The girl just giggled. You're a thinker, huh? Well, good luck in there. She gave him a small wave and jogged off to join the crowd, leaving Izuku staring after her, his heart doing a nervous flutter kick against his ribs. The tension at the gate was palpable. Everyone was coiled like a spring, ready to explode into action. Izuku tried to focus, to run through his strategies. Start with basic cats for recon. Find a choke point. Use tank cats for defense. Prioritize one-pointers to build a score buffer. Manage my energy, manage my cooldowns, and… Start! President Mick's voice boomed from unseen speakers, so loud it shook the very ground. For a split second, nobody moved. The sudden, unceremonious beginning caught everyone off guard. What are you waiting for, listeners? The real world doesn't have a countdown. Go, go, go! The dam broke. The massive crowd of examinees surged forward as the gates slid open, a stampede of quirks and determination. Everyone, that is, except Izuku. He stood frozen for a precious 2 seconds, overwhelmed by the sheer explosive start. By the time he snapped out of it, he was alone, the dust of the departing crowd settling around him. Right, he breathed, slapping his cheeks. Focus. He sprinted into the mock city. The sounds of combat were already echoing between the buildings, explosions, crashes, and the shriek of tearing metal. He rounded a corner and saw his first target, a sleek, one-point robot on tank treads, its single red optics swiveling towards him. Okay, Izuku. This is it. Show them. He reached into his well of power, the vast reservoir he had spent 10 months filling to the brim. The energy flowed from him, familiar and potent. With a series of rapid pop-thump sounds, 6 basic cats materialized at his feet. They looked utterly absurd against the backdrop of concrete and steel, their cartoonish smiles a stark contrast to the robot's menacing red eye. Go! Izuku commanded. The small feline horde waddled forward with surprising speed. The robot, programmed for direct combat, seemed momentarily confused by the non-threatening targets. It raised a pincer arm to strike, but before it could, the cats were upon it. They swarmed its treads, their solid light bodies acting as living, smiling roadblocks. The robot's treads spun uselessly, gummed up by the mass of cats. One particularly ambitious basic cat leaped onto the robot's chassis and began headbutting the red optic with a series of ineffectual but distracting thunks. The one-pointer was completely immobilized, its targeting systems thrown into chaos. It was a fly caught in a very weird, very smiley spiderweb. Now! Izuku yelled. He summoned an axe cat. The helmeted creature appeared, brandished its weapon, and charged. While the robot was distracted, the axe cat reached its leg joint and swung with all its might. Crunch! The sound of stressed metal gave way to a sharp snap. The leg joint shattered. The robot tilted, its optic flickering, and then a small panel on its chest popped open, revealing the word, deactivated. 1 point, Izuku breathed, a grin spreading across his face. It worked. He had found his rhythm. While others were using flashy, energy-intensive attacks to blow robots to smithereens, Izuku became a master of efficiency. He was less of a warrior and more of a pest control expert. He would enter an area, send his basic cats to swarm and disable the one-pointers, and use his axe cats to surgically dismantle the tougher, red-highlighted two-pointers by targeting their joints and actuators. He used tank cats to create temporary cover from ranged attacks, advancing methodically from street to street. He saw other examinees in action. A boy with engines in his calves, the formal one from the briefing, shot past like a rocket, kicking a three-pointer's head clean off. In the distance, a massive explosion rocked the sky, and Izuku knew, with absolute certainty, that it was Bakugo, racking up an astronomical score. For a moment, he felt a pang of his old inadequacy. His method was slow, quiet, and decidedly unflashy. He wasn't destroying villains. He was systematically dismantling them. No, he told himself, shaking the doubt away. This is my style. Brains over brawn. Strategy over raw power. He checked his mental tally. 7 minutes had passed. He had managed to secure a respectable 45 points. His energy, his cat food, was down to about 30%. The continuous summoning and directing was a significant drain, but his training was paying off. He wasn't even winded. He had enough left for one last push. That's when the ground began to tremble. It started as a low rumble, a vibration he felt in the soles of his shoes. Then it grew, a deep, earth-shaking tremor that sent cracked spiderwebbing across the asphalt. The buildings around him groaned. A car alarm, triggered by the shaking, began to blare. A shadow fell over the street, vast and absolute. Izuku looked up, and his blood turned to ice. Rising from behind a skyscraper, blotting out the sun, was the zero-pointer. It was a titan, a Goliath of green metal and black circuitry, at least 20 stories tall. Its head was a featureless block of steel with a single, colossal red camera for an eye. It moved with a slow, grinding inevitability, its massive arms sweeping aside entire buildings as if they were made of cardboard. That's way bigger than I expected, Izuku whimpered. The other examinees had the same reaction. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic swept through the streets. The zero-pointer. Run! It's insane! We can't fight that thing. Forget the points. I'm getting out of here. A stampede began, a frantic retreat away from the mechanical behemoth. Izuku, his mind screaming the advice from President Mike, run away, avoid it, turned to join them. His 10 months of training hadn't prepared him for something on this scale. His axe cats would shatter against that armor like glass. His tank cats would be nothing more than pebbles under its massive feet. Survival was the only logical option. He took one step, then another, and then he heard a small, pained cry. Ow! Izuku stopped. He looked back, against the tide of fleeing students. And he saw her. The nice girl with the gravity quirk. She was trapped, her leg pinned beneath a large slab of concrete that had been dislodged by the zero-pointer's emergence. She was struggling, her face pale with pain and fear, trying desperately to push the rubble off. The zero-pointer took another thunderous step, its giant metal foot descending directly towards her. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku saw it all with a horrifying clarity. The girl's wide, terrified eyes, the other students running past, too caught up in their own fear to notice the shadow of the robot's foot growing, promising to extinguish her in a single, brutal stomp. His mind was a battlefield. One side, the logical, analytical part that had gotten him 45 points, screamed at him. You can't do anything. It's impossible. You'll die. Your quirk is useless against it. Saving yourself is the only correct course of action. But another voice, a deeper, more powerful instinct, roared to life within him. It was the same instinct that had sent him running towards the Sludge villain. It was the memory of All Might's words on that rooftop. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. He looked at the girl, trapped and helpless. He looked at the monstrous robot, an unstoppable force of destruction. He knew he couldn't destroy it. He knew he couldn't fight it. He probably couldn't even slow it down. But he had to try. He had spent 10 months building his body into a weapon, a power source for his army. And he was not going to run away while someone was in danger. Izuku's legs moved before he had a chance to think. He sprinted back into the danger zone, a lone figure running against the current of fear. The other examinees stared at him as if he were insane. What is that idiot doing? Someone shouted. He didn't care. He had one goal. He poured every remaining ounce of his cat food into a single, desperate strategy. It wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. Hooray-hurrah! He screamed, the sound raw and desperate. He shoved his hands forward, and the air in front of him shimmered. Pop-thwump! 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 One after another, in a frantic, rapid-fire sequence, tank cats materialized from thin air. Not 1 or 2. Not 5 or 10. He summoned every last one his drained reserves could muster. 20 solid light, rectangular bodies, forming a wall of cartoonish defiance. Shield formation. Layered defense. He yelled, his voice cracking with the strain. The cats, guided by his will, scrambled into position. They didn't just form a line. They formed a dome, a multi-layered igloo of solid light directly over the trapped girl. One layer, then a second over it, then a third, reinforcing the structure, their smiling faces turned up towards the descending foot of the mechanical god. He was running on fumes. Black spots danced in his vision. The world tilted, his body screaming from the massive, instantaneous energy expenditure. He had maybe 1% of his power left. It wouldn't be enough. The shield would absorb some of the impact, but the sheer force would crush it, and her along with it. The zero-pointer's fist, a chunk of metal the size of a city bus, began its descent. It wasn't aiming for the shield. It was swatting at a nearby building, but its trajectory would clip the edge of his defense, bringing the whole structure down. He needed more. Something different. A final, desperate gambit. He felt a new well of energy inside him, a hidden reserve he had never touched before. It wasn't his normal cat food stamina. This felt deeper, more primal, a core part of his quirk's very essence. He knew, instinctively, that using it would come at a terrible cost. He didn't hesitate. He reached for it, and it answered with a surge of searing, agonizing power. It felt like every cell in his body was being set on fire. An intricate, glowing pattern, like a cat's face made of circuit boards, flared to life on the back of his right hand. Cat! He grunted, aiming his arm at the descending fist, his entire body shaking. He gathered the energy, focusing it, shaping it. A brilliant white light, tinged with blue, began to coalesce in front of his palm. Cannon! He roared, and the energy erupted from his hand. It wasn't a laser or a projectile. It was a massive, concussive blast of pure force, a shockwave that momentarily took the shape of a giant, roaring cat's head. It shot through the air, silent for a split second, and then slammed into the side of the zero-pointer's colossal fist. Boom! The sound was deafening, a physical blow that shattered every remaining window in the street. Izuku was thrown backwards by the recoil, tumbling across the asphalt like a rag doll. The cat cannon didn't have the power to stop the fist. It couldn't even damage it. But it had just enough force to do one thing. It altered its trajectory. The giant metal fist, nudged just a few critical feet to the side, missed the cat's shield completely. It smashed into the building beside it, showering the area in dust and debris, but the shield, and the girl beneath it, were unharmed. A klaxon, deafening and final, blared across the entire city. "Time's up," Present Mix's voice announced. The zero-pointer froze, its attack unfinished. Its single red eye dimmed. Silence descended upon the ruined street, broken only by the sound of crumbling concrete and Izuku's own ragged, painful gasps. He had done it. She was safe. The adrenaline vanished, and the full cost of his final attack crashed down on him. A pain unlike anything he had ever known flooded his system. His right arm felt like it had been shattered and then dipped in lava. His vision dissolved into a gray, staticky haze. The world spun violently, and he knew no more. Izuku awoke to the smell of antiseptic and the gentle sound of beeping. He was in a clean, white room. Recovery Girl, the legendary youthful heroine, was sitting beside his bed, clicking her tongue. My, she said, giving him a piece of candy. You really did a number on yourself, dearie. Severe quirk exhaustion, muscle tearing in your right arm from the backlash of an unknown technique, and a nasty concussion from when you hit the pavement. You gave us quite the scare. The girl? Izuku croaked, his throat dry. Is she okay? Recovery Girl smiled, a warm, genuine expression. She's perfectly fine, thanks to you. In fact, she came here right after they freed her leg and refused to leave until she knew you were all right. She wanted to give you some of her points, if you can believe that. Izuku's heart swelled with relief. That was all that mattered, the points. He mumbled, the reality of the exam crashing back down. Did I pass? He had 45 villain points. Was that enough? He'd spent the last crucial minutes on a 0-point objective. He had probably failed. Recovery Girl just chuckled. You think a hero school like UA would have a purely destructive entrance exam? A hero's job isn't just about fighting villains, Sonny. She gestured to a monitor on the wall. It replayed the final moments of the exam, a drone's eye view of his desperate charge, the creation of the cat shield, and the final, explosive blast of his cat cannon. Villain points are one thing, she said, her voice soft with pride. But there are other kinds of points, awarded by a panel of judges for heroic acts. Self-sacrifice. Strategic rescue. Courage under fire. On the screen, a score breakdown appeared next to his name. Izuku Midoriya. Villain points, 45. Rescue points, 60. Total, 105. Izuku stared at the screen, his eyes wide. 60 rescue points. They had been watching the whole time. They hadn't seen a reckless idiot. They had seen a hero. Tears welled in his eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of despair or frustration. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. He had done it. With his own power, his own strategies, his own courage. He had proven to the world, and more importantly, to himself, that a boy with an army of cartoon cats could stand on the same stage as everyone else. He was going to UA High. His journey was just beginning. The letter from UA High had not arrived in an envelope, but in a small, sleek package. When Izuku opened it, a disc had clattered out, projecting a holographic image of All Might in his full, heroic glory. The acceptance message had been a booming, triumphant affair, filled with praise for his heroic heart and uniquely strategic mind. His mother had wept tears of joy so profound they seemed to wash away a decade of her own quiet fears for him. Izuku himself had simply stood there, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek, the validation a warm, solid thing in his chest. Now, standing before the impossibly large door of Class 1A, that warmth was being rapidly replaced by a frantic, ice-cold wave of anxiety. The door was a monument, easily 4 times the height of a normal person, built to accommodate students with the most extreme and varied quirks imaginable. It was a clear statement. This was not junior high anymore. This was the big leagues. Taking a breath that did little to calm his hammering heart, Izuku pushed the colossal door open. The classroom was already buzzing with a low hum of activity, and at the center of it, two familiar faces were already clashing. It is highly inappropriate to have your feet on school property. The formal, bespectacled boy from the examinee 7111, was lecturing, his arms chopping the air with rigid, karate-like motions. You are sullying the legacy of the upperclassmen who once used this very desk. The target of his lecture was, of course, Katsuki Bakugo. He was sprawled in his chair with an air of supreme arrogance, his feet kicked up onto his desk, a sneer plastered across his face. Legacy? The hell do I care about some dusty old extras? He growled, not even bothering to look at the boy. What junior high you from, Mr. Formal Wear? I attended semi-private academy, the boy announced, puffing out his chest. My name is Tenya Ida. Semi? Bakugo sneered, a flicker of malicious recognition in his eyes. So you're an elite, huh? Looks like I'll have a blast crushing you. Ida recoiled as if struck. Izuku, seeing an impending explosion, decided to make his presence known before things escalated. As he stepped inside, Ida's head swiveled towards him with the speed of a security camera. You! Ida exclaimed, marching over to Izuku with a stiff, determined gait. It is you! The one with the unruly hair and the muttering. Izuku flinched. Hello. I am Tenya Ida, he declared, extending a hand for a handshake that felt more like a formal challenge. I must apologize for my conduct during the entrance exam briefing. You had correctly deduced the true nature of the practical test, while I, blinded by procedure, failed to see the forest for the trees. I misjudged you. He bowed a full 90 degrees, a gesture so sharp and sudden Izuku worried he might get whiplash. Oh. And no, it's fine, really. Izuku stammered, waving his hands frantically. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you, Ida-kun. Midoriya-kun! A cheerful voice called out. The girl from the exam, the one he had saved, was standing by her desk, beaming at him. You got in! That's amazing! Of course you did, after that awesome rescue. She bounced over to them, her brown hair bobbing with the movement. I'm Ochako Uraraka. I tried to talk to the judges about giving you some of my points, but they said you didn't need them. You got so many rescue points, it was crazy. That cat shield thing was so cool, and then that big blast at the end. What was that? Her praise was so genuine and enthusiastic that it short-circuited Izuku's brain. His face went up in flames. It's called the Sea Cat Cannon, he mumbled, staring intently at his bright red shoes. And the shield was just a wall of T-tank cats. It was nothing, really. Nothing? Uraraka and Ida said in unison. It was a brilliant and selfless maneuver. Ida declared. You prioritized the safety of another examinee over your own score. It was the very definition of heroic spirit. As they talked, Izuku could feel a pair of crimson eyes burning into the side of his head. Bakugo was staring at him, his expression a thunderous mixture of confusion and pure, undiluted rage. That look said more than words ever could. How? How are you here? How did you, the useless Deku with the joke Quirk, do something that has these people praising you? Before the silent confrontation could escalate, a new voice, impossibly tired and devoid of all energy, cut through the chatter. If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. Everyone turned towards the classroom door. Lying on the floor, zipped up in a yellow sleeping bag like a grotesque, human-sized caterpillar, was a man with shaggy black hair and dark, bloodshot eyes. He took a long, slow sip from a juice pouch before unzipping himself and shuffling into the room. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down, he said, his voice a monotonous drone. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. You can't afford to waste it. He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on each student for a fraction of a second. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. A collective wave of shock went through the class. This exhausted-looking man was a pro-hero. Right, Aizawa said, pulling a blue UA gym uniform from his sleeping bag. Get changed into these. Immediately. Then meet me on the P grounds. The P grounds were sun-drenched and vast. The entire class stood in a nervous line, clad in their new uniforms. A quirk assessment test? Uraraka asked aloud, echoing the thoughts of the entire class. But what about the entrance ceremony? And orientation? There's no time to waste on pointless pleasantries if you want to become heroes, Aizawa stated flatly. He turned to Bakugo. Bakugo. You got the highest score on the practical exam. What was your farthest softball throw in junior high? 67 meters, Bakugo answered, his usual arrogance tinged with confusion. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. Do whatever you want, just stay in the circle. Bakugo grinned, a predatory, excited look on his face. He stepped into the circle, stretched his arm back, and then unleashed his full power. Daithai, he screamed, the word carried on a massive, roaring explosion that propelled the ball into the sky. The sheer force of the blast sent a hot wind washing over the rest of the class. Aizawa held up a small device. A number glowed on the screen. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in a chorus of oohs and ahs. Whoa, 705 meters? That looks so fun. We get to use our quirks as much as we want. Aizawa's expression, which had been bored, suddenly turned cold. A dark, almost menacing grin spread across his face. Fun, you say? He said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all going to be fun and games? Idiots. The mood plummeted. Today, you will compete in 8 physical fitness tests. You will use your quirks to push your limits. He paused, letting his next words sink in. And the student who ranks last in total points will be judged to have no potential, and will be immediately expelled. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic swept through the students. Expelled? On the first day. But that's not fair. Uraraka protested. And you think natural disasters are fair? Aizawa countered, his voice sharp. Or power-hungry villains? Or catastrophic accidents that wipe out whole cities? Fair is not a word a hero has in their vocabulary. Our job is to combat unfairness. For the next 3 years, you will push you to your breaking point. This is a trial by fire, so show me it wasn't a mistake to let you in. Go beyond. Plus ultra. His gaze swept over the class, cold and unflinching. Izuku felt a familiar dread mixed with a new, burning resolve. This was it. Another impossible test. But this time, he wasn't the same weak, scared boy. He had All Might's training behind him, and an army at his command. He had to be creative. He had to be strategic. He had to prove he belonged. The emotional turmoil of the moment, the terror of expulsion, the fierce determination to succeed, triggered something within him. It was the same sensation he'd felt after the battle with the refrigerator, a soft, internal chime as a new piece of his quirk clicked into place. He quickly accessed his mental menu and saw the notification, a new rare cat capsule, likely earned from the sheer emotional high of passing the exam. He didn't have time to open it, but just knowing it was there was a small comfort. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The first event paired students up for a sprint. Izuku watched as a girl with frog-like features finished in just over 5 seconds, and Ida, with his engine quirk, cleared the distance in a staggering 3.04 seconds. Izuku knew his own physical running speed, while improved, was average at best. He needed an edge. He remembered the new capsule. Taking a gamble, he focused his will. Open. The capsule in his mind spun and cracked, revealing a new, 4-legged silhouette. New unit acquired cow-cat. Attributes, extremely high speed. Per traction. Single attack. Perfect. When his turn came, he stepped up to the starting line. The robot official droned, ready. Go! Instead of sprinting, Izuku planted his feet and summoned his new unit. With a pop-thwump, the cow-cat appeared. It was a bizarre sight, a creature with the body of a cow, the smiling face of a cat, and an udder. It was also, he noted, surprisingly small, about the size of a large dog. Without hesitation, Izuku leaped onto its back. Go! He yelled. The cow-cat's legs scrambled for purchase on the track for a split second, its hooves kicking up dust. Then, it found its footing and shot forward. The acceleration was jarring, snapping Izuku's head back. It was less like riding an animal and more like being strapped to a poorly aimed bottle rocket. It galloped with a chaotic, lurching gait, its speed undeniable but its control non-existent. They veered wildly from side to side, nearly crashing into the lane marker. Izuku held on for dear life, his face a mask of wind-blasted terror and concentration. They crossed the finish line in a clumsy, sliding heap. The timer beeped, 5.58 seconds. It wasn't a record-breaking time, but it was far better than he could have managed on his own. He had finished with a decent, if utterly undignified, score. He dismissed the cow-cat and stumbled away, dizzy but satisfied. A summoning-type quirk used for mobility, Aizawa mumbled to himself, making a note on his device. Unconventional. Test 2, grip strength. This was simpler. Izuku watched as a student with multiple arms, Mizo Shoji, recorded an incredible 540 kilograms. Another student used a tape-dispensing quirk from his elbows to wrap the device for a better grip. When it was Izuku's turn, he knew his own physical grip strength, while improved, was nothing special. He took the device and held it in his left hand. With his right, he summoned a single tank cat. The rectangular block of solid light materialized in his grip. It was dense, unyielding, with no give whatsoever. He squeezed with all his might, his knuckles turning white, his muscles straining. The tank cat's smiling face didn't even flicker. He was essentially trying to crush a block of hyper-condensed energy. The device beeped. 110 kilograms. Again, not a top-tier score, but respectable. It was more than double what an average person could manage, proving that his summons were not just ethereal light, but tangible, physical objects with immense density. Test 3, standing long jump. Izuku watched as Bakugo used his explosions to fly across the entire sandpit. The frog girl, Tsuyu Ajui, easily cleared it in a single bound. His own jumping ability was limited. He couldn't clear the pit, but he didn't need to. He took a running start, and just as his foot reached the edge of the pit, he summoned a tank cat directly beneath where his next step would be. Pop thwomp. His foot landed on its solid, flat back. Before his momentum failed, he summoned another one just ahead, then another, and another. He created a rapid-fire, instantaneous bridge of smiling, rectangular cats, sprinting across their backs as they materialized just milliseconds before his feet landed. He crossed the entire pit without ever touching the sand. He landed on the other side, dismissing the cat bridge behind him. A few of his classmates stared, a mixture of bewilderment and grudging respect on their faces. He wasn't just summoning things, he was building with them. Test 4-5, repeated sidesteps sit-ups. These tests relied more on the physical conditioning he'd endured for 10 months. His scores were firmly in the middle of the pack, a testament to his newfound stamina and core strength. He didn't need to use his quirk, and Aizawa seemed to approve of the fact that he knew when not to rely on it. Test 6, seated toe touch. Izuku grimaced. This was his worst event. All the muscle he'd built had made him less flexible. He scored near the bottom, a humbling reminder that his body was still a work in progress. Test 7, distance run. This was where his training with all might truly shone. As other students with flashy, sprint-focused quirks began to tire and slow down, Izuku maintained a steady, relentless pace. His stamina, his cat food battery, was now a massive power source. The 10 months of hell on that beach had forged his lungs and legs into engines of endurance. He finished in the top 5, earning him a significant number of points, and looking far less exhausted than most of his peers. Then came the final test. The one that had made Bakugo famous for a moment. Test 8, softball throw. It was Izuku's turn. He stepped into the circle, the worn softball feeling heavy and unfamiliar in his hand. He looked at the scores projected on a nearby wall. He was currently ranked 18th out of 20 students. He was hovering just above the expulsion line. A mediocre throw would almost certainly drop him to last place. His physical throwing strength was abysmal. He might be able to manage 40 meters, maybe 50 if he was lucky. It wouldn't be enough. He needed something big. Something that would prove, unequivocally, that he belonged here. What's Deku gonna do? He heard one of Bakugo's new cronies snicker. Is he gonna have a cat throw it for him? Bakugo just watched, his arms crossed, a look of intense, analytical fury on his face. He was trying to understand. The clumsy but fast ride, the solid cats, the instant bridge, none of it fit with the weak, useless Quirk he had mocked his entire life. This throw was the final piece of the puzzle, and he was watching with burning intensity. Izuku took a deep breath, calming his racing heart. He thought back to the entrance exam, to the zero-pointer, to the searing, agonizing power of the cat cannon. His arms still ached with the phantom memory of the backlash. Recovery Girl had healed the physical damage, but she'd warned him that using such a powerful, uncontrolled technique could cause permanent harm. Aizawa's tired voice cut through his thoughts. If you're just going to stand there, we can mark you down for a 0 and move on, Midoriya. That was the push he needed. He wasn't here to be cautious. He was here to be a hero. He raised his right arm, the one that had unleashed the blast before. He focused, not on his stamina, but on that deeper well of raw Quirk energy. He felt the familiar, fiery sting as he began to draw from it. The glowing, circuit-like sigil of a cat's face flared to life on the back of his hand, pulsing with a faint blue light that was visible even in the bright sunlight. His classmates gasped. "Whoa, what's that? I didn't see that before." Izuku ignored them. He drew his arm back, the soft ball held tight in his grip. The light from the sigil intensified, crawling up his arm in glowing blue lines. A swirling vortex of white and blue energy began to coalesce in front of his open palm. It crackled with contained power. He mimicked a throwing motion, but instead of releasing the ball at the apex, he held onto it. As his arm swung forward, he brought his left hand up to brace his right wrist, just as All Might had taught him to brace himself for a big effort. The swirling energy in front of his palm condensed into a violently vibrating sphere. "Cat!" he grunted, the power building to a critical point. He thrust his arm forward and released the softball. In the same split second, he unleashed the energy. Cannon! It wasn't a projectile this time. It was a controlled, directed shockwave. A silent, concussive blast erupted from his palm, shaped like a roaring cat's head. It slammed into the back of the softball just an inch after it left his fingertips. There was no grand explosion like Bakugo's. There was only a sharp, violent crack that sounded like the air itself was breaking. The softball, caught in the full, focus force of the blast, vanished. It didn't fly. It ceased to be a ball and became a white, streaking comet, leaving a momentary vapor trail in its wake as it shot into the upper atmosphere. Izuku was thrown back by the recoil, stumbling but managing to stay inside the circle. His right arm screamed in protest, a deep, aching pain that was a shadow of what he'd felt before. He had managed to control it better this time, bracing for the impact, but it still took a heavy toll. The class was dead silent, their jaws collectively on the floor. They stared at the empty sky where the ball had disappeared. Even Bakugo's eyes were wide with shock. Aizawa lowered his device, a long, slow whistle escaping his lips. He turned the screen for the class to see. 704.5 meters. It was less than a meter short of Bakugo's score. Achieved not by explosive propulsion, but by a single, and possibly powerful concussive force. Aizawa looked at Izuku, who was panting, clutching his aching arm. For the first time all day, the teacher's tired, bored expression was gone. In its place was a look of sharp, profound intrigue. And for just a fraction of a second, the corner of his mouth twitched upwards in what could almost be described as a smile. "Not bad, Midoriya," he said, his voice a low grumble. "Not bad at all." The final scores appeared on the projector. Izuku Midoriya was ranked 10th. Right in the middle of the class. He hadn't just avoided expulsion. He had proven himself to be competent, powerful, and wildly unpredictable. The invisible student at the bottom, a boy named Minoru Mineta, let out a wail of despair. "By the way," Aizawa said, his bored expression returning as he erased the scoreboard. "The expulsion thing was a lie." The class, minus a stoic Momo Yayorozu who claimed she saw it coming, erupted. "It was a rational deception," Aizawa droned, "to make you push yourselves to your absolute limits." He began to walk away. "Class dismissed. Your curriculum guides are in the classroom. Look them over." As the students, buzzing with relief and excitement, began to head back to the locker rooms, Izuku stayed behind for a moment, rubbing his sore arm. He had done it. He felt a quiet, profound sense of accomplishment. That feeling was shattered by a voice like grinding gravel. "Deku, he turned. Bakugo stood a few feet away, his body rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, smoke wavering from his palms. His face was a terrifying mask of rage, but underneath it was something else, a deep, gnawing confusion. What the hell was that? Bakugo demanded, his voice low and trembling with restrained violence. The weird cow, the blocky walls, that cannon thing. You never had any of that before. Your quirk was summoning useless, waddling freaks. Where did you get this new power? Who gave it to you? He was searching for an explanation, any explanation that would fit into his worldview. He was hoping Izuku had gotten a new quirk, a borrowed power, something that would explain this sudden, impossible leap in ability. Because the alternative was something his pride could not accept. Izuku looked his childhood friend, his tormentor, directly in the eyes. For the first time, there was no fear, no stammering, no flinching. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. You're wrong, Kaken, he said, the words simple but carrying the weight of 10 months of sweat and pain. It's not a new quirk. It's not a borrowed power. It's the same one I've always had. He held up his hand, the sigil now faded but the memory of its power still present. I just finally learned how to use it. The words struck Bakugo with more force than any physical blow. It wasn't a new quirk. It was the same useless quirk he had belittled, mocked, and dismissed for over a decade. This versatility, this power, this potential, it had been there all along, hiding in plain sight, and he had been too arrogant to see it. It meant that Deku, the pebble he had always kicked to the side of the road, had been a diamond in the rough. It was a truth so fundamentally opposed to Bakugo's sense of self that his entire world seemed to tilt on its axis. His rage, once hot and explosive, solidified into something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous. He didn't scream. He didn't explode. He just stared, his crimson eyes promising a war. Izuku met his gaze, unflinching, before turning and walking towards the locker room, leaving Bakugo standing alone on the field, consumed by a silence more terrifying than any of his explosions. The pecking order had not just been challenged, it had been shattered. And a new, far more complicated battle had just begun. The afternoon classes at UA High were anything but ordinary. Instead of history or literature, the curriculum for the hero course was far more practical. The classroom door slid open with a dramatic swoosh, and in a blur of red, white, and blue, All Might burst into the room, his signature smile blazing like the sun. I am coming through the door like a normal person, he boomed, his voice filling the room with an infectious, heroic energy. He struck a pose, his hands on his hips, his ridiculously impressive physique straining the seams of his Silver Age hero costume. A wave of pure, unadulterated excitement swept through Class 1A. This was it. The number one hero, the symbol of peace, was going to be their teacher. Welcome to the most important class in UA High, All Might announced, striding to the front of the room. Welcome to Hero Basic Training. Here, you will learn the fundamentals of what it means to be a hero, and you will learn them through trial by fire. So let's get right to it. Today's lesson will be combat training. He pressed a button on a remote, and sections of the classroom wall slid open, revealing numbered cases. And to go with that, you need to look the part. These are the costumes you designed based on your quirk registration forms and your own requests. Get changed, and meet me at ground beta. A chorus of excited shouts erupted as the students scrambled to find their cases. Izuku's hands trembled as he located his case number 13. He had poured all of his analytical mind and hopeful heart into his costume design. He just prayed the support company had gotten it right. When he emerged in the tunnels leading to ground beta, he felt a strange new confidence settle over him. His costume was not flashy, but intensely practical. It was a durable, dark green jumpsuit with black accents, reinforced with pads at his elbows and knees. A sturdy utility belt, designed to hold energy rations and first aid supplies, was cinched at his waist. The most prominent features were the fingerless gloves and a specialized headset with a built-in communicator, and a tactical visor that could slide down over his eyes. It was the uniform of a field commander, not a frontline brawler. The design screamed strategy, and for the first time, looking at his reflection, Izuku felt like he truly looked the part. He saw Uraraka nearby and his breath caught. Her costume was a sleek, form-fitting pink and black suit with thick, round boots and gauntlets designed to help her control her quirk's side effects. She looked bubbly but capable, a perfect reflection of her personality. "Wow, Deku-kun," she said, giving him a thumbs up. "Your costume looks so cool and professional. Very tactical. Why, yours is great too," he stammered, his face heating up under his mask. "It's, very streamlined." One by one, the rest of the class appeared, a vibrant, chaotic lineup of future heroes. Ida looked like a medieval knight had been fused with a race car, encased in gleaming white and blue armor with engine-like exhausts on his legs. And then there was Bakugo. His costume was pure aggression, a black, sleeveless top that showed off his muscular arms, baggy pants with knee guards, and the most striking feature, massive, grenade-shaped gauntlets that covered his forearms. A spiky, explosive-looking mask framed his perpetual scowl. He looked like a walking declaration of war. "Now that you all look the part," All Might's voice boomed as they stepped into the sunlight of Ground Beta, a sprawling cityscape identical to the one from the entrance exam. "It's time to begin," All Might explained the scenario. It would be a 2-on-2 indoor battle. One team would be designated as heroes, the other as villains. The villain's objective was to guard a fake nuclear weapon hidden somewhere in a multi-story building. The hero's goal was to either capture the weapon or subdue both villains within the time limit. "This is a test of teamwork and strategy," All Might explained. "The situation is that the villains have hidden a weapon in their lair. The heroes have to stop them. It's a classic battle of good versus evil." "Sir." Ida's hand shot up. "How will the teams be decided?" "Through the time-honored tradition of drawing lots," All Might boomed, pulling out a box. One by one, the students drew their teams. Izuku's hand shook as he reached in and pulled out a ball with the letter on it. He looked up to see who his partner was. Uraraka was holding a matching ball, and she gave him a relieved, beaming smile. Then he looked to see who their opponents would be. His blood ran cold. Tenya Ida was holding a D-ball. And standing next to him, a terrifying, predatory grin spreading across his face as he held up his own matching D-ball, was Katsuki Bakugo. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. His first official combat trial would be against the person he feared most in the world. "Team A will be the heroes," All Might declared. "Team D will be the villains. The rest of you, come with me to the monitoring room." He paused, his gaze falling on Izuku and Bakugo, a flicker of concern in his heroic smile. "Young Bakugo, young Midoriya, remember, this is a training exercise. Push yourselves, but do not let personal history cloud your judgment. A true hero knows restraint." Bakugo just grunted, his crimson eyes never leaving Izuku. There was no restraint in that gaze. Only a burning, obsessive promise of violence. Inside the building, Bakugo and Ida made their way to the bomb room on the 5th floor. The room was a large, open space filled with concrete pillars. "So, Bakugo-kun," Ida began, already getting into character as a villain. "Our opponents will be here soon. What is our strategy?" "Midoriya-kun possesses a versatile summoning quirk with unknown limits, and Uraraka-kun can manipulate gravity. A coordinated assault could be problematic. I suggest I secure the weapon while you patrol the lower floors to intercept them." Bakugo slammed his fist against a pillar, leaving a small scorch mark. "Shut up, Four Eyes," Ida recoiled. "Excuse me? Deku's quirk isn't the problem," Bakugo growled, a low, dangerous sound. "Deku is the problem. He's been hiding this power from me his whole damn life. Lying to me. Looking down on me." The narrative in his head had twisted Izuku's fear into deception, his weakness into a calculated insult. "This isn't an exercise. This is pest control." He cracked his knuckles, miniature explosions popping around them. "Forget the plan. I'm going to find that damn nerd and I'm going to blast him into a million glittering pieces. You just stay here and guard the stupid bomb." Before Ida could protest the complete and utter lack of strategy, Bakugo was gone, stalking down the hallway, a predator hunting his chosen prey. Ida sighed, adjusting his helmet. "He is not taking the role of a villain seriously at all," he muttered to himself before turning his attention to securing the room. Outside, Izuku and Uraraka stood before the towering building, a blueprint schematic in Izuku's hand. His mind was a whirlwind of panic. Bakugo was coming for him. He knew it. This wasn't about the bomb for him. It was personal. Deku-kun? Uraraka's voice cut through his fear. You're doing that muttering thing again. Are you okay? You look pale. He took a shaky breath, forcing himself to focus. She was his partner. He couldn't let her down. This wasn't just about him and Kaken anymore. I'm okay, he lied, though his voice trembled. I'm just thinking. Kaken. I mean Bakugo-kun, he's going to come straight for me. He's not going to guard the objective. You know him that well? She asked, her expression serious. Izuku gave a humorless laugh. I've known him my whole life. His strategy is always the same, overwhelm the target with relentless, explosive force. He's like a guided missile, and right now, I'm the target. Uraraka frowned. So we have to fight him? He seems really strong. No, Izuku said, his voice gaining a sliver of confidence as his analytical mind took over, pushing the fear aside. No, we can't fight him. Not head-on. That's what he wants. He wants me to stand and fight so he can prove he's stronger. A direct confrontation is a losing battle. My Quirk, it's not built for that kind of one-on-one duel. He looked at the blueprints, his eyes scanning the layouts, the hallways, the stairwells. He looked at Uraraka, her Quirk buzzing with potential. An idea, wild and desperate, began to form. We can't win with brawn, he said, tapping a finger on the blueprint. So we have to win with brains. Uraraka-san, your Quirk is our key to victory. But we have to be smart. We have to be sneaky. What's the plan? She asked, her eyes shining with trust. Izuku took a deep breath. The plan has 3 phases. Phase 1, recon and distraction. I'm going to use my cheapest, fastest summons to map out the building and, more importantly, to find Kaken and keep him busy. Phase 2, delay and attrition. While he's distracted, we'll make our way up, but I'll use my stronger summons to block hallways and slow him down. His Quirk uses a lot of energy. The more he has to blast through my obstacles, the more tired he'll get. Phase 3. Phase 3 is our secret weapon. He explained the final, crucial part of the plan to her. Her eyes widened, then a grin spread across her face. That's crazy, she whispered. But it's brilliant. I can do that. I know you can, Izuku said, a genuine smile touching his lips. Her confidence was infectious. I'll be counting on you. Ready? She nodded, her expression determined. Ready. All right, heroes. All Might's voice crackled in their earpieces. The trial begins. Now. Izuku and Uraraka slipped through a ground floor window, the shadows of the empty building swallowing them. The air was still and silent, thick with tension. Okay, Izuku whispered, placing a hand on the cool concrete floor. Phase 1. He closed his eyes, focusing on his cat food reserves. He drew a small, controlled amount of energy and pushed it out. With a series of soft, rapid pop-flump sounds, 5 basic cats materialized around them. They were perfect scouts, cheap to summon, quiet, and disposable. Spread out, he commanded them mentally. First and second floors. Find him. The 5 little creatures waddled off in different directions, their simple, smiling faces a bizarre contrast to the tense, tactical situation. Izuku and Uraraka pressed themselves into an alcove, listening. For a full minute, there was nothing but the sound of their own breathing. Izuku could feel a faint, psychic connection to each of his summons, a sort of mental radar. He knew their general location and status. Then, one of the connections abruptly vanished. It felt like a tiny light bulb in his mind suddenly winking out. Boom! A muffled explosion echoed from the 3rd floor, followed by Bakugo's enraged roar. Is that all you've got, DKU? Sending your pathetic little mascots to do your dirty work? He's on the 3rd floor, east wing, Izuku whispered to Uraraka. He's coming down. Let's go. West staircase. Now. They moved quickly and quietly, Izuku acting as the nerve center of the operation. He sent 2 more basic cats scurrying down the hallway they had just left. A few seconds later, both of their psychic signals were extinguished in another fiery blast. Bakugo was definitely on their trail. They reached the second floor and started moving towards the center of the building. Okay, Phase 2, Izuku breathed, his heart pounding. Time to slow him down. He stopped at a major intersection of hallways. He poured a larger amount of energy into a summon, and 3 dense, rectangular tank cats materialized, completely blocking the corridor. They were silent, smiling sentinels. He'll have to go around or blast through, Izuku explained. Either way, it cost him time and energy. They continued their ascent, leaving a trail of feline obstacles in their wake. A wall of tank cats here, a swarm of basic cats there to act as a false trail. The sounds of Bakugo's rage followed them, a symphony of destruction. Each explosion was a confirmation that their strategy was working. He wasn't thinking. He was just reacting, blasting through every single cat Izuku put in his path, his patience wearing thinner with every boom. They were nearing the 4th floor when their luck ran out. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with Bakugo. He was panting slightly, his costume singed in a few places, but his eyes were blazing with manic, triumphant fury. Found you, he snarled. There was no time to think. He lunged, his right hand already sparking. Stun grenade! A blinding flash of light erupted from his palm. Izuku and Uraraka cried out, throwing their arms over their eyes. Bakugo used their disorientation to close the distance, his left hand raised, ready for a powerful, direct explosion. It's over, DKU. Izuku, his vision nothing but a mess of dancing spots, acted on pure instinct. He shoved Uraraka behind him and summoned a tank cat directly in front of his body. Boom! The explosion was deafening at this range. The force of it hit the tank cat head-on. The solid light construct held for a fraction of a second, its smiling face contorting under the pressure, before it shattered into a million glittering particles. The shrapnel of light was harmless, but the concussive force still threw Izuku back, his ears ringing. A pathetic little shield won't save you! Bakugo roared, preparing another blast. They were trapped. The hallway was a dead end. Bakugo was blocking their only escape. The plan was falling apart. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Izuku's focus. He needed something, anything, to get them out of this. He needed a way to see past Bakugo, to know what was on the next floor, to get a message to Ida, to create a distraction that wasn't just ground-based. He needed to be in the air. This desperate, specific need, the desire for an aerial advantage, was the key. It was the emotional trigger his Quirk had been waiting for. Just as Bakugo lunged again, Izuku felt the familiar, chiming sensation in his mind. A new rare cat capsule flashed in his mental UI. There was no time to hesitate. Open! The capsule cracked, revealing a silhouette with wings. New unit acquired bird cat. Attributes, flight capable. Low health, low attack. Area attack. Flight capable. With a surge of adrenaline, Izuku summoned his new cat. With a soft pop thwomp and a gentle flutter of wings, the bird cat appeared. It was the most ridiculous-looking creature he had summoned yet, a simple, white cat's head perched atop a pair of tiny, flapping wings. It was small, weak, and looked utterly harmless. Bakugo skidded to a halt, his expression of murderous rage momentarily replaced by one of pure, unadulterated bewilderment. The hell is that? He breathed. The bird cat, guided by Izuku's desperate will, shot upwards. It wasn't fast, but it was airborne. It flew over Bakugo's head and zipped down the hallway behind him. Bakugo's confusion lasted only a second. Don't you ignore me! He screamed, turning to blast the flying creature. But that 1 second was all Izuku needed. The distraction! He yelled to Uraraka. It's time for the big one. Phase 3. While Bakugo was momentarily turned away, Izuku slammed both hands on the floor. He opened the floodgates of his cat food reserves, pouring a massive amount of energy into one final, overwhelming swarm. Go! Keep him busy! Pop thwomp pop thwomp pop thwomp! The hallway was suddenly filled with cats. 20, 30, 40 of them. A tidal wave of smiling, waddling basic cats surged forward, flooding the corridor. They couldn't hurt Bakugo, but they swarmed him, climbing over his legs, headbutting his knees, getting in his way. It was death by 1,000, incredibly minor, annoyances. Get off me, you freaks! Bakugo roared, unleashing a series of wide-arc explosions, blasting through the feline tide. But for every 10 he vaporized, Izuku summoned 5 more. The chaos was absolute, and in that chaos, Izuku and Uraraka enacted the final, desperate phase of their plan. Now Uraraka-san! She slapped her palms onto Izuku's back. Release! She cried out. Then she touched her own suit. Release! Suddenly, the world went quiet and light. The sensation of weightlessness was disorienting but exhilarating. They were floating. The window! Izuku whispered, pointing. They pushed off the wall, their movements clumsy in zero gravity. Bakugo, completely consumed by his one-man war against the Catpocalypse, didn't even notice as they floated silently towards a nearby window. Izuku, using a small bit of his remaining energy, summoned one last tank cat. Uraraka immediately made it weightless, too. It floated beside them, a solid, rectangular platform. Izuku shattered the window with a reinforced elbow strike. The sound was lost in the cacophony of Bakugo's explosions. They drifted out into the open air, 4 stories up. Below them, the mock city sprawled out. Above them, the 5th floor, and their objective was waiting. Okay, Izuku panted, grabbing onto the weightless tank cat. Just like we practiced on the beach. Use the wall to push off. They used the side of the building as their launch pad, pushing off the brickwork to propel themselves silently upwards. It was a slow, tense ascent, a quiet ballet of zero-gravity teamwork set against the soundtrack of Bakugo's distant, furious shouting. On the 5th floor, Tenya Ida was the model villain. He had meticulously removed every piece of debris from the bomb room, ensuring there was no cover for any potential intruders. He had even practiced a villainous monologue. So, you have finally arrived, heroes, he said to the empty room, striking a dramatic pose. You may have gotten past my foolishly impulsive partner, but your luck runs out here, for I, the brilliant Tenya Ida, shall be your doom. Mwahahaha. He cleared his throat. The laugh felt a bit forced. He would have to work on it. He could hear the continuous explosions from the floors below. He shook his head. Bakugo-kun is certainly thorough, but his methods are far too destructive. He'll probably have points deducted for property damage. He was so focused on his role-playing and the sounds from below that he didn't notice the faint sound of tapping on the window behind him. Crash! The window exploded inwards as Izuku and Uraraka came tumbling into the room. Uraraka immediately slapped her hands together. Release! She yelled. Gravity slammed back into them with a vengeance, and they hit the floor in a heap, the weightless tank cat clattering down beside them. Ida spun around, his mind struggling to process the sudden, unorthodox entry. Wadash? You came from outside? That is against the spirit of the exercise. The spirit of the exercise is to win, Ida-kun. Izuku grunted, scrambling to his feet. Ida was fast. Incredibly fast. Before Izuku could even summon another cat, Ida had crossed the room in a blur of motion, his armored form a juggernaut. Your clever tricks end now, but Izuku wasn't his target. Uraraka was. Ida correctly identified her as the one who needed to touch the weapon. He moved to intercept her. Bird cat! Izuku yelled. The tiny, winged creature, which had been hiding near the ceiling after flying up the stairwell, dove down. It couldn't do any damage, but that wasn't its purpose. It flapped directly in Ida's face, a flurry of tiny wings and annoying chirps. Gah! A flying pest! Ida yelled, swatting at it. The distraction forced him to slow down, his precise movements thrown off by the unpredictable, flapping creature. That was the opening Uraraka needed. She didn't run for the bomb. She ran for a nearby concrete pillar. Using her quirk on it, she made the massive chunk of debris weightless. Sorry about this, she yelled. With a mighty heave, she swung the pillar like a baseball bat. Comet home run! Ida, still distracted by the bird cat, looked up just in time to see a shower of weightless rubble, the fragments of the pillar Uraraka had struck, flying towards him. He easily dodged the big pieces, but the smaller, pebble-sized bits rained down all around him, forcing him to shield his face. And while he was momentarily pinned, Uraraka made her move. She sprinted past him, her body low to the ground. She leaped, her hand outstretched, and her fingers brushed against the cool metal of the bomb. She wrapped her arms around it in a hug. "I've got it!" she screamed in triumph. A klaxon blared through the building, loud and clear. The hero team wins! All Might's voice echoed from the speakers. Down on the third floor, the sound cut through Bakugo's rage like a physical blow. The last basic cat in front of him dissolved into motes of light as Izuku's concentration broke. The hallway was suddenly silent, filled with smoke and the smell of nitroglycerin. Bakugo stood alone, panting, surrounded by scorch marks. He looked up, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified disbelief. He had been so focused on his personal battle, on crushing Deku, that he had completely forgotten the objective. He hadn't just been distracted. He had been outplayed, outsmarted, and made to look like a fool. The useless, worthless Deku, who he had been hunting with the intent to destroy, had won the entire match without ever even fighting him. The humiliation was a cold, sharp blade twisting in his gut. Back in the monitoring room, the rest of Class 1A was speechless. They had watched the entire battle unfold on the screens, a masterclass in strategy versus brute force. Whoa! Kirishima breathed. He beat Bakugo without even throwing a punch. A brilliant and unorthodox plan, Yaoyorozu commented, a thoughtful look on her face. He turned his opponent's aggression into a weakness, and used his teammates' abilities to their fullest potential. That was truly pro-level thinking. All Might watched the screen, a deep, proud smile on his face. He saw Izuku, bruised and exhausted but standing victorious, helping Uraraka to her feet, and he saw Bakugo, alone in a ruined hallway, his shoulders trembling with a rage too profound for words. The MVP of this exercise, All Might said, his voice resonating through the observation room, is young Midoriya. Not only for his ingenious plan, but for his ability to adapt under pressure and lead his team to victory against a more powerful opponent. He looked at the screen showing Bakugo. His smile faded slightly. The boy's talent was immense, undeniable. But his pride, his obsession, it was a poison that, if left unchecked, would surely destroy him. This loss, All Might hoped, would be the first bitter dose of the antidote. When Izuku and Uraraka returned to the monitoring room, they were met with a wave of praise. But Izuku's eyes were fixed on Bakugo, who stood in the corner, silent and simmering. The battle was over. The exercise was won. But Izuku knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that his war with Kaken had only just begun.